someone once told me, if you die and you go to fill in the blank with whatever your, heaven, afterlife, whatever is, what if you met the version of you that was never scared to try something? What would that feel like? And what would you regret?
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Today's chat was sensational. The vibes were flowing. The conversation was deep, filled with so much empathy, compassion, and wisdom. Aisha's lived the life of many. It was mind-blowing to hear her stories, her life experiences, her many previous professions, and how she always had a smile on her face. Aisha is awesome, and I can't wait to get into it. So let's get into it. Aisha Alfa is an award-winning comedian as well as an actor, writer, and host who can currently be seen co-starring with Kaley Cuoco and Chris Messina in the new dark comedy thriller based on a true story created by Craig Rosenberg and Jason Bateman. Aisha has also previously been seen in Good Trouble, Sorry for Your Loss, and multiple seasons of DEGRASSI, The Next Generation, and The Next Class. Her incredible life and upbringing has given her comedic edge and vision to see the world with a much broader lens. She was born in Nigeria, raised in Canada, lived in South Korea and France, and now calls Los Angeles home. She's recently released her debut comedy album, All the Parts, produced by All Things Comedy, which includes Bill Burr, produced a YouTube interview series, Plus One, about motherhood, pregnancy, and fertility, as well as launched her own podcast titled The Shout Out Show, available on all podcast platforms. She's also traveled the world performing comedy, including at the prestigious Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal, South Africa, Switzerland, plus a lot more. She was also a Bob Curry Fellow at the Second City, an NBC stand-up finalist, was nominated for a Canadian Comedy Award, and was a past winner of the Winnipeg's Funniest Person with a day job from Rumors Comedy Club. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about her previous life as a professional soccer player, being a wedding planner and a coach, collaboration, finding your voice and performing, authenticity, passion, abundance, and happiness. Just to note, this chat was recorded prior to the writer's strike. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. This could be a funny place to start. What was more fun for you? Coaching, wedding planning, or being a professional soccer player?
Oof. I think that if we're just talking like pure, like broad strokes fun, would have to be playing soccer, because I literally like playing. I was playing. You know what I mean? That was my whole thing. My whole job was just play, have fun, I'm naturally competitive. So it's like, just be the you that you can be. But I think that, I think that's like the most fun, just by like, if you were going to have no explanation. Wedding planning, I think, is the thing that I have the most funny stories from, because it's wild.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And like coaching was like, there's also funny things from that, but it feels like weird to talk about that. So I don't really talk about, like, I never like told jokes about my coaching life, other than things that were totally like, you could not ever trace it back to anybody. And it was mostly just about people who I never worked with, who were like inappropriate or whatever. But like, it's such a vulnerable space that there's really funny things that happen that it's like a vault. I would never like talk about it, even if I didn't mention their name.
That's so interesting. I want to talk about each one individually, but in particular with
Yeah.
coaching, I've heard you talk about why you loved it, and it was, you loved bringing out people's authenticity, you love to empower them. I still think, and you have to do what's comfortable. You can say, as long as you don't say like Adam, 37, lives in Canada. There would be a lot of story, and a lot of people would have hilarious. We're all complex individuals. I could see you doing like a full hour on just the coaching element because there's so many funny elements regarding like what people want. So I'd love you to bring it up in your stand up.
I think that what will happen is, I think maybe it's the stand-up that feels too personal for me because I was the coach and I'm talking about somebody. Even if I made it anonymous, I would literally feel devastated if somebody who I had coached ever watched me do comedy and then was like, oh my gosh, that's me. Like, I would feel devastated.
Yeah.
But I think what might happen is perhaps in the future, I write a TV show based on some of these characters, like put characters together so that
Amazing.
it's never like one person who's you know what I mean? How you do that? You can like put a bunch of people together to make them the most wild, ridiculous version of something. So maybe that's what I'll do.
So I resonate with this strongly because I've written a show kind of about my upbringing in a sense, and I've got the worst of my friends. It's like the worst of people. It's kind of like a millennial Curb Your Enthusiasm. And
Amazing.
too many of my friends are like, that's this person, and that's this person. Like, I don't know if it's too much. So I like exaggerated the worst bits, and I took things and I changed things. And yeah, I don't think anyone would necessarily be like, hey, I was that asshole that did that. How, like people don't have that self-awareness as well.
No, they don't want it to be them. So they're like, that person sounds crazy. And you're like, you are crazy. you know?
And, you could literally just change their name from like Greg to like David, and they're like, okay, it's not me. So
Yeah, exactly.
I,
Exactly.
I know you do the writing. That is a hilarious. I'm not a producer, but you pitched it to me very well. That would be the world of a coach, because first of all, the way that you've spoken about coaching in other podcasts and interviews is top notch, high integrity, high authenticity, and I love the word empowerment. Coaching can have I've had only positive experiences with coaches or speaking to coaches. It can have a negative connotation, but I think because
Oh,
so many
yeah.
people are so interested in this inverted commas new space, it'd be the funniest thing to see where you're just a coach trying to get the best out of people that don't necessarily know how to get the best out of themselves.
Yeah, it makes me, I don't know if you've watched the show Shrinking
No.
with Jason Segel and Harrison Ford. I just started watching it and I'm like, oh, this is like really like hitting home to me because it's a therapist who just basically his wife dies and he kind of breaks and he just starts telling his clients like what he actually thinks. And
Wow.
as a therapist, it's even more so like just like, what do you think about that? But he's like, you should leave your husband. And it's like he's like, oh, I shouldn't be saying this, but that's just what you should do. Enough is enough. And it's like it made me really hit home with me. I was like, I know. I also wanted to say these things to people, but I have to be like, well, what's it? You have to really like figure out like what do they want and help them to feel empowered to make choices and then support those choices. But yeah, I sometimes I just wanted to be like, just stop doing the thing then, But like,
Yeah. Hmm. Or do you ever just pretend to write notes and you're just like, this person's an idiot, this person's an idiot, or just do it all the time?
What's funny? I never wrote notes during sessions because I can't multitask.
Yeah.
So I was like, I just have to be like focused and then hope I remember something to like write a note afterward. But yeah.
I resonate with that as well. And why the empowerment and the authenticity? What actually drew you to coaching and doing it right?
I think that's part of who I am. And not, I think it is part of who I am. And it comes out in everything I do in life.
Oh,
As a comedian, like I am in an industry where people sort of think that, it's one person out for themselves. You kill someone's mom to get a spot. Like, I just don't, I'm not like that. Like, I feel like there's an abundance. I feel like there's enough for all of us. I'm very excited for my friends when they have big things happen. Like, there are times when I feel jealous and it really is hard for me because my natural state of being is really like gratitude and joy for people and encouragement and excitement and like the biggest champion for like I want to be someone's hype man, like That's
Cool.
how I am naturally.
Yeah.
So when I feel jealousy or something like that, I know that there's stuff that is going on in my life that's making me feel like I'm not fulfilled. I'm not doing the things that I want to be doing. Um, but in every aspect, like everything I've ever done as a wedding planner, I've always been really like with the bride and the groom, like you don't have to worry about what anybody else wants. What do you want? Like it comes out in whatever I'm doing naturally. So um, it felt like and I mean, I came to coaching at a time where I was like, who am I? What am I doing with my life? Like what am I meant to do? And I sort of whittled down all these different things and came to coaching. And a professor that I had in university, I took sports psychology as my undergrad, and he was a coach and he taught in sports psychology, and he was like, he wrote me a letter after my final exam about how he thought I'd be an ideal candidate to be a coach because he's like, it's just naturally in you and I can see that, so if you ever want to, let's talk. And then when I was trying to figure out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, I kind of came back to that space and was like, yeah, let's do that. And I just stopped everything and went for it and started a business that ended up being very successful. So yeah, so I kind of lived the ethos that I was promoting, which was great.
Okay, there's 200 points we could discuss. That's amazing. I love this abundance mindset, and I'd love to know if maybe like professional sports have helped. But speaking to a lot of people in particularly stand up, um, going up the ranks, there can be a lot of competition. I don't know what your experience is, or a lot of perceived competition where this person's getting my spot, or there's only so many spots, or this person went on this TV show. And there can be a lot of jealousy. And also jealousy is completely natural. I'm glad that you spoke about that because to me, it's an indicator, like you said, if I'm jealous of something, it means, oh, I need to work on something, or what do I really want? And I use it as an
Yeah.
indicator to push me forward. But in terms of like abundance and stand up, from what we've heard on this podcast, a lot of people have said that they've had people like stab in the back, or they want the role, and there can be a lot of jealousy and fighting. But you don't really go near there. You're talking about hyping people up and how we can all do this together in an abundant mindset, which I find very rare. Have you been challenged in this space, or you just know the universe is going to provide and you're going to be fine?
I think that I previously was almost like naive in my full faith in abundance and the universe. Like I was like, of course. Like it just was never, I was never questioning it in my mind, which also is naive in a way, but it really worked for me, which was great because I kept finding success and things kept, but I think that you touched on it a little bit, that I played a team sport professionally and I played a bunch of team sports. And so playing team sports, really, you have to be great individually. You have to be competitive with yourself in order to get to your peak performance and to get to your best conditioning and your best ability and skill. And also, the only way that gets showcased in a team sport is if you are a team player. And so whether that means I need to sit on the bench right now because that 11 is the top 11 that's going to get us to where we need to be, or if that means I need to step up and be a great substitute, or if that means I need to step up and be a great starter, or whatever that means, like you take on that role because it's best for the team. But in that team, you have to be the best version of yourself. So I think it's like really lends to coming into something like stand-up comedy where it really is individual, but you are also part of a community. When you're so alone, like you are literally alone on stage, you need community in order to want to show up to those shows because it can be treacherous. It can be like just depressing, right? When you're on the road all the time or whatever. So you need to create and foster community. And that means trust. That means investment in other people having joy and having success. But even more than that, like the truth is, if somebody wants if someone wants my friend Sophia Zolan, she's an amazing comedian. She's a woman. She's Greek. Then they don't want me. You know what I mean? They were never looking for me if they were looking for Sophia. She gets the role. And it doesn't mean that I'm not good. It just means that what they need right then is the Sophia Zolan of the world. And then at some point we'll go out for another show. And if they hire me, they never wanted Sophia. So it's kind of like this idea. I think this is me, a lot of rambling, but this comes from my dad once said to me, and this is like, it kind of gives me goosebumps whenever I say it, but he's, a Nigerian man. He's very much into spirituality, and he's very, when he speaks, people listen kind of guy. But he said, when you have a big decision to make and you have two choices, right? Like there's a fork in the road, you need to deliberate and think about it very carefully. And then when you make a decision, you commit fully to that decision. Because once you've committed, the other option never actually existed. And legit, it's like, it's kind of spooky to me the way that that resonates, because then if you take that to like expand it to everything else, right? Like if there's a show and a late night show and there's only one comedy spot on that late night show, if I get chosen, then it was never available to anybody else. If somebody else gets chosen, it was never available to me. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't go out for those things, but it just means that that's always, the choice that was made was always the right choice. So it's never a slight on me if somebody gets something. Not, and I would never think of it that way, but like, it just never is, if that makes sense.
Yes,
it's very like,
yes.
you know, woo-woo maybe, but that's kind of...
We speak about this on this podcast. You said that so much better than I've ever said it in over 200 podcasts. I'm very grateful for that. But okay, you actually walk the talk. I have a very abundant mindset, but, you know, I do get challenged, but it sounds like, you know, from acting, I know you also do acting.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting rejected so many times, and you just talked about
Yeah.
that with your friend, that if she gets it, it's meant for her. So does that mean you can go out for 20 roles and you get rejected and you're like, okay, universe wasn't meant for me? Are you able to just flick the switch? Is it inbuilt?
Yes, I mean, obviously, especially if there's a role that I'm like, oh, I would be perfect for this. I really want this. This is amazing. It's always disappointing if you don't get the thing that you want. And then that pick myself back up moment is, okay, well, then this isn't meant for me. I'm going to watch it and enjoy watching this person in it. Maybe seeing that will give me impetus or motivation to write something new or to do something else. But like, it's totally normal to feel disappointed, right? Like, also part of our job as actors is rejection. That is built into the job. You are going to audition a million times and you're not going to get most of them. That's just the way it works. And that's great because you get to learn so much. You get to build your repertoire. You get to build emotion from that. Like, you need to play a role where you're disappointed. Give me an actor who has been trying for a long time and who has not gotten with the things that they want. They can pull from that, right? I think that people talk a lot about, like, you know, this person's an overnight star, and rarely are they ever. If you speak with the person, it's usually that they've been working really hard and learning and putting in the work, and they are ready when that luck comes their way. But if there ever is a person who's just lucky, straight off the bat, they get a bunch of roles, like, first of all, good for them. What a joy. And also, at some point in everyone's career, you must reinvent the wheel that is you. So, you know, you see these huge stars that have had these long series and all these wonderful things, and then you go to an audition and you see that person at the audition and you're like, oh, so we're always going back to being humble and starting from scratch. So it's almost like you kind of want rejection in order to build yourself up. So when that role comes, you are fully ready, not just ready to perform, but ready to be like, you know, the long hours it takes, the remembering the people's names, to know how to like interact with people, to know how to talk to crafty when you're on set. Like, all these different things build you this whole performer or talent that's the full package that people are going to want to work with again and again and again. And so it's like, you got to put trust in yourself that when you show up, you've got the goods, and that you are going to be long lasting, and that you are nice, and that people are going to want to work with you, you know, that you will go the extra distance and you will create boundaries so that you are able to do self-care and also, you know, be there for others. So it's always that balance, I think. And we're always like learning forever and ever. Most performers, we want to do this until we die. We don't want to retire. It's not a job. It's this thing we get to, like, we feel privileged to do. So
I can see why you're a very good coach, because that's, you know, living and breathing it. And there's just so many points of, I've written down like 50. And I think it's okay. I'll talk about something that used to bother me, and I'd love to know kind of your perspective on it. I used to do corporate, and, you know, you've done business entrepreneurial stuff as well, and also soccer. In that line, there's generally like it's linear. And going back to your whole holistic view, we think, I don't even know how to say this, but, you know, life's not just a straight edge. We need to experience certain things. So as you said, we can put in and grow and expand ourselves and our craft and everything in our life. But back from the corporate side, if you do well as a coach, you know, you can build up, you can get more clients. And yes, maybe you lose clients, or it's a dry season, or if you're a wedding planner, the business grows. But then when it comes to like creative arts, like acting, for example, you could be on the show, like you mentioned, these big shots, and then you see them and they're auditioning for a similar show to someone that's just starting out. And to me, I found that at the very start, I wouldn't say frustrating because I came from the accounting background. If I do a good job, I'm going to get manager and then I'm going to be partner. And it's a completely different way of looking at the world. So is that a easy, hard transition, or because you've got this abundant mindset, it was easy for you to adjust?
I mean, I think that the truth is, I've never really had a 9 to 5 job. I worked for a while. The closest thing I had was I worked as a temp for a little bit at the Business Development Bank of Canada, which is like a crown corporation that does development dollars, like a bank, but like for developing business and trying to help the economy, which I had no business, working in. I don't know. I'm not a finance person, right? But like I did a temp job at their front desk. And I was bubbly and I was friendly and I had a great time. I was creating fun and joy for people. So after, I think it was 8 weeks of that, they were like, the person came back who was out on sick leave, and they said, well, why don't you stay on and do this other thing? And then that ended. Why don't you just stay on and do this other thing? And then eventually they were like, why don't we just give you a permanent job, right? And this is like, so this is a coveted position where you're working for the government, so you get really great benefits, you get great time off, you get paid really well. And the job that they created for me was essentially like, I like to call it like a fun captain, right? Like to create the social aspect and like these things. They literally made up a job that was just, we like having you here, so let's give you some money and stay. And I remember for a while I was like, oh, maybe I should do this. It doesn't really feel like the thing I wanted to do, but like maybe. And then one of the managers who was on his way out, he was retiring. He took me into his office and he said, come in, let's discuss. And he closed the door and he's like, don't take the job. Don't do it. This is going to kill you. This is going to dim your light. This is not what you are meant for. You are meant for something completely different. Do not let this cloud your vision of what you want. And it was this beautiful moment where I was like, oh yeah, totally. Like that's 100%. Like, obviously I should know that. And I didn't take the job. And then that was right before I got into stand-up comedy and acting and all this stuff. And, cut to like a decade later, I got an message from him on Facebook or something. He had found me and he just wrote to me and he's like, I just wanted to like reach out. I see your success. I'm so proud. I'm so happy you didn't take the job. It's just amazing to see you shine. And I was like, wow. But, to answer your original question, I think it's been, there is an element that has been easier for me because I have never had that regular paycheck that has made it, I show up, I have this linear path. So I've always been sort of reinventing the wheel. I was a wedding planner, so it's like a seasonal job and you really have to work to get clients and you have to do all these things. I worked in sales at one point. I had my own business coaching. I worked as a tutor, I've never really done that. So there is an element that it's been easier for me to do this, but also like my personality, I'm like, what a gift, man. Like I don't work. I have this job where I get to be creative and someone pays me. And yes, there are stretches where no one's giving me money, but I've come to the place in my life where I've saved money up. Like I know how to figure out ways to make money. I know how to hustle. I've worked in crappy jobs. So like, I have no shame in like paying the rent, man. I got kids. I have no shame. I will take on a job if I need to. I will work at McDonald's if I need to, because if that's what I need to do. I've been there. I've done that before. But like, part of it is like, in order to be in my mind, a creative for me, I must have a full life.
Yes.
I have nothing to create from. I have nowhere to draw from if I do not have a life outside of performing. So I have kids. I have a healthy relationship with my husband. I have friends. I like to travel. I like to watch TV. I like to watch movies. I meditate. I, write stuff that's not just TV and film. I write other things. Like, I need to have all those. I love to eat food. Like I love to have adventures. So I need all of that stuff, because otherwise the job's not worth it. If my whole life depends on somebody else picking me for a role for acting or somebody else booking me on a job for comedy, like it's probably just not worth it. Like you have to really love it and be willing to say, worst case scenario, I never get put on another show. I never get cast in another movie or TV show, do I still like my life in the end? And if the answer is no, then you should get either a better life or a different job.
It's such an important point, and I've like readjusted what I've wanted along the way. But it's also someone that's extremely accountable to themselves and also aware of their ego. So I'm not saying this was me, but at one stage I thought I would be like the star of a TV show, which I still would like to do, but it's not
Right.
for the reasons that I thought in my head. The bonuses or the benefits that come with that, that was purely ego driven. Whereas now if I got
Yeah.
it, I realize it's not so much. Anyway, it sounds like you've got this great relationship with ego, because to be able to enjoy your job, or you don't even call it a job, you call it I forgot what you said, like you're living
I
the
don't even know. Yeah.
and I think that's so important, because whenever I frame something as a job, it's always been so heavy for me. But like doing this
Yeah.
or writing, like I'm living what I like. And then another crucial point you said is that you need to have things outside of your craft. And that's really important, because we think, like, let's just say we want to be an actor and we make our whole life being an actor. As you said, it's hard to draw on those experiences. But you're a big proponent of having a full life, because then everything is better. And it's not spoken about enough, which really annoys me, because the most successful people in my mind, they might not be number one on the call sheet, but do they have good relationships? Are they happy? Can they pay the bills? Can they greet you with a smile? All of these things, which to me is what makes success, not just being number one on the call sheet. And I love that you figured it out in your very young age. And also, I don't know how you lived a life of like 200 people doing all of these different things. It's crazy. Are these thoughts for you, or you kind of like tick them off, you've learned the lesson and you just follow your passions and your hobby and your intuition?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's both, right? Like I think before it was very natural, it just came to me naturally. And I think as I've gotten older and I have more responsibilities with a family and a husband, it is a little bit more work, because I have to be more pointed with my time. And I have to, I've sort of come to this point very recently where I'm like I've burnt down who I am, and I'm going to rise from the ashes type thing. Because for so long, I was a single woman who had these dreams and these goals, and I was very good at driving toward those. And then I got married, so I had to think of somebody else. And then we quickly got pregnant, and so I devoted my life, physically and then mentally and spiritually and everything to my child. Then the pandemic hit. And then I got pregnant again, and I was on bed rest. So it was even more like everything outside went away, and I was devoting everything to this. And now I'm like, oh, you keep saying like, well, when things get back to normal, but like this is the new normal, and there is no more Aisha from 2015. That person is wonderful. She was cool, man. She was very cool and very fun. I loved her, but she's gone. Like she's dead now, and I'm like rebirthed as this, and I'm now like, oh, it is a little bit of like, let's take a step back. I have to do the work that I used to do with people all the time to be like, what do I actually really want now? And are those goals, are those things, is sort of my brand, and I hate that word, but like, is that still who I am? Or am I kind of like, I used to want this, I used to be this, and I sort of am like going backwards, or am I where I'm at? And I just wanted to go back to like this idea of ego, right? Like we all have ego, and that's like a part of the makeup of all of us. And don't get me wrong, I definitely have ego, and I have an ego as well, right? Like those two things, which are slightly different. But like, I do love being treated like a star. Let's just put that out there, right? When someone's driving me around, when I'm getting my makeup done, I love it. And that's one of the benefits of all the hard work I've put in. And I sit in it and I luxuriate in it and I enjoy it. And I don't have to feel any shame or apology in that. But also, like you said, I'm not driven to do those things solely for that. So that's great. And so now I'm really like revisiting what it is I want, with no ego, with no shame, with no jealousy, with no like comparison. What would actually make me happy as the Aisha I am now, the mother, the wife, the more grounded person. I'm in therapy, I'm more healed, I'm deeper, I'm struggling through things that I have to like heal from. And that's like, it was easier when I wasn't even thinking I had an issue, or I didn't have to think about that trauma. But now that I'm dealing with those traumas, it's more difficult, but I'm becoming a much better version of myself, a much more healed, like thoroughly healed and stronger and empowered and full and like joyful and lovely person. And there is this process that I will come out of where I'm going to be like, damn, I can't wait to be that, you know, but also being like, but where am I at right now? And how do I do what I want to do from this place, knowing that I am on that journey and that process, but it's not about like who I was or who I'm going to become. Like, what's happening now? Where am I at? You know?
Okay. Once again, you should, I know that you write a lot. I can see to get all of these points out is brilliant. And I'm glad that you've got a support system where you can flourish. You know, you're putting in the work, which is amazing, but you've got a support system. And yes, you want to do it for your craft, your husband, your children. That's very rare. A lot of people, and there's no judgment whatsoever, a lot of people don't want to look at that stuff. And then when it gets harder, and you talked about even like time restraints, we go, I don't have enough time to deal with this, or I've got to do stand up, or I've got to look after my kids, you know, all of the normal stuff. A lot of people, I'm guilty of this all the time, and I don't even have those things in my life. We can just not want to deal with it and sweep it under the rug. But you talked about therapy, meditation, and all of these things. What has actually made you want to continue this growth or evolve, or however you phrase it?
I mean, once you open the box, you can't close it. So, like sometimes I think I'm like, oh gosh, life was so much easier when I hadn't peeked a little bit in there. But now that I have peeked in, I can't unsee it. You know, like I'm healing from things that I was avoiding big time. And this is such a timely interview because literally in the last, I'd say week, is when I've come to this new realization that there's new stuff I need to heal from that I have been sweeping under the rug without even realizing it. Yeah. And I've been like, oh, I just gotta write. I just gotta go more, do more comedy. I just gotta. And it's this like forward falling thing when what I really need to do is just like stop, you know, like turn the treadmill off for a second, stop, regroup, you know, stretch a little bit maybe. Tie up the shoelaces a little bit. This is a bad analogy with this running thing, but you know, like really like it's not about doing more. It's about taking a step back and like letting everything pass me by and just like sitting in what's here and going, oh, I have not dealt with the fact that, you know, I had this great success with this show that I was just on, and that was wonderful. And that was like the most exciting thing for me. And I have not dealt with like, first of all, celebrating that enough personally, and just sitting with it and being like, yay me, let me journal about this. Like, what did I learn? Where am I at with that? I haven't dealt with the fact that like the pandemic is over. So now things are going to be picking up. Most recently, I haven't dealt with the fact that like, there's not going to be work for a while now because of these strikes. So like, what do I want? Like all of these things have kind of come to a head in the last 7 days, literally the last 7 days for me. And up until this point, I had this feeling of like anxiety. I couldn't sleep. I didn't really know where the anxiety was coming from. And I kept being like, how do I, meditate, breathe through this, journal, whatever. But I had to really like put a halt on everything because it's time to go back and do all the hard work. That means I can't necessarily be performing the way I want to be or going out for things. Perfect timing because nothing's happening. But like, you know, I need to take a step back. And sometimes when I'm feeling that like urgency and panic, I'm like, I don't need to do more and figure it out more. What I need to do is literally drop all the balls and just sit and decide which ones I want to pick up again or which ones I want to shift and change and remold and create what I want from it.
I think that's such an important lesson. And especially when these things happen, for me, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone else, like it's the universe trying to teach us a lesson, and it can normally the hardest. You don't appreciate it in the moment whatsoever. But I had this tutor at school, and when I was going for like scholarships, you have like 10 minutes to write an essay. I've never spoken about this. It's crazy that it's popped up. And you just try and write to get done in 10 minutes. He goes, Michael, I'd rather you plan for 9 minutes and write 1 minute, because just sitting down and being in the space, you allow yourself to actually process what's going on and you can actually move forward. But if you just go, oh, there's a time when you have to get it done, you're going to do a very bad job, or it's not going to be as good. And that has actually, I don't do it all the time, but changed my life. But even like moments when, oh, I haven't told my TV show yet, why isn't it being made? And you spend like 8 hours in a room writing. Now, if I write 1 hour in a day, that's so much better than doing the 8 hours every day for a week, because I'm actually sitting down and I'm putting time towards it. And I would imagine now, given you're saying, time is a lot more crucial for you. And so even in these moments when we have to reevaluate, which is so important, constant reevaluation is the key from what I've spoken to everyone, being able to be in that moment and just like take that step back and do nothing. Also something we don't talk about because we're kind of told if you're not working, if you're not doing this, then you're not a success. And that also drives me nuts. So I'm glad that you've mastered this and you figured it out, even if it's in the last week. It's really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was thinking about writing and someone was like, what's your process? And I was like, I think that my process is sometimes I need to sit in front of my computer and just think and not write anything. And when I'm trying to like write a scene, sometimes I'll just close my eyes and like watch it like it's a movie or a TV show in my head,
Yep.
and then come back and write out what I've watched. And and what it's very interesting because it's like I think for some people they that writing every day, being on the schedule, like eventually something good will come of it. That works for them. And for me, that makes me feel very frantic and like overloaded. So for me, I often need like space and time in order for things to bubble up. Like a lot of people say, like, when I'm in the shower, that's when my ideas come to me. And it's because you're not doing anything else, right? Like you can't take your phone in the shower. You're not writing in the shower. Like you have to just like be there and be with yourself. So I think that's when often stuff bubbles up, is when we just like remove everything and there's space for this to come out of us.
Agree.
And also like it's a privileged space we're in to be creatives who are successful enough to do this as our, financial way that we support ourselves and our families. But part of that is the benefit is you have time off, right? Like we have like big chunks where we get a bunch of cash, and then we have chunks where we have no money, but that you can watch TV during the day as part of your creative process. You can go for walks and go for hikes. Like that is the payoff. That's what everyone in the office was like, man, I wish I was a writer or an actor because they could do all like, they can go for lunch in the middle of the day. And then actors are like, oh my God, I have nothing in the day. I have to be working. And it's like, we're literally like, that's the thing that everyone covets and wants. So like to sit and be like, oh, what a privilege. I can go for lunch with someone, or I can do nothing today, or I can go for a hike, or I can be very productive and like focus in and do this stuff. Like it's our prerogative and it's our creative process that we get to take charge of. So it is a privilege, but it's hard to see that sometimes when you are someone who, I'm like, I come from like a hustle culture. If you're not hustling, stand up, if you're not doing shows every single night, I'm like, I'll tell you what, I used to do multiple shows every single night and I ended up stressed out and in the hospital. So, I guess that doesn't work for me. So, and that's okay.
I want to pigeonhole that because you said also 10 billion amazing points back to the holistic kind of like mindset. And just going back to the accounting, work was work. But now being a creative person, meditation is work. Even though I don't frame it as work, but it helps me be a better writer. It helps me be a better podcaster. Going for a friend is good because I'm out of my space and I can just talk and free flow. That's part of work. Or going to a yoga class, that's work. And we don't see that. We don't see that enough. We just see that as like something else, but it's an investment in yourself. And especially as a creative person, even though we're all creative people, it helps your career. And I'm so glad that you talk about all of these things because it's not spoken about as well. This is just my pet peeve. So all I've been doing this podcast is just saying what my pet peeves are. But I think it is just so important that doing it, let's just say your only job is stand up, going out, meeting people, talking, doing the yoga, going for the walks, going for the shower, that helps do the stand up. And I think it is so important. I'm glad you bring it up. All of it helps the one thing, and it helps you. And then when you've grown and you worked on yourself or whatever you want to call it, the craft is a lot better. And I'm glad that you talk about that. And then also just on the meditation side, when you've cleared your mind when you're writing, I think that's so brilliant. I've written quite a few scripts from meditation where my mind's just been clear. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a genius. And I'm like, first of all, everyone's a genius. But it's more that I've cleared my mind, and other people do this as well. And you allow in these brilliant ideas. You allow just space. And we've all, you mentioned the shower. We're all capable of receiving or doing great things when we just put away some of that noise, even if it's for 5 minutes. So I'm glad that you bring that up. Is that also part of the process of what you do? Like, for example, with writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, kind of life is art, right? So everything you do is like in service, if you, of whatever, of your life, right? So if I meditate, I might not be like, I'm meditating so I can write better, but I'm meditating so that I can be more in touch with myself, more calm, take away time from my phone, whatever it is, it's serving me. And then that in turn will serve my art. So sometimes my art is cleaning up after my kids, right? But like that is serving me. And so that is serving my art. And I think that often, like, we don't think about, I mean, I don't know, as a stand up, I think people don't necessarily call it our art because it feels very like nitty gritty. We're in a club at night drinking alcohol. It doesn't feel, people don't necessarily consider that art,
Yeah.
but that is like your creative outlet. And there's a really great quote that I always think about and always use as like a quote from Martha Graham, who was like a pioneer for modern dance. And she talks about how our job is not to judge the energy that the universe has given to us as creatives. It's not our, like, we don't even get to. That's like detrimental to the world. And our job is just to be the channel for the art and to let it flow and to not restrict it in any way. So when you think about it that way, like my job is to be the best version of me that's possible every moment of every day so that my art can flow the most freely out of me. It's like letting yourself shine the most so that your art can come out the most pure. Um, and it's like, I say that and I try and like think back to that, and that's very difficult, especially with social media where you're like it's compare, it's like distract yourself, it's whatever. Especially when it's scary to put things out there. It's scary to put out things. You're like, is this funny? Is this complete? Is this well done enough? Is the production good enough? Like all of that stuff is what this quote is encouraging us to let go of and just let it out, like slough off our art into the world and let ourselves shine more brilliantly. And it's a challenge. I think it's like a challenge in a way of like, oh, it's not like, well, it is hard, but like also challenging ourselves to do that regularly is a beautiful thing. Um, and yeah, I some days I'm great at it, and some days I am learning and I'm in process of it.
The human experience. I think it's also so wonderful because exactly right with Instagram and all of that stuff, we think it has to be a certain way. But through my experience, it to me comes down to control. When I'm not trying to control and when I just let go and that stream of idea of consciousness comes in and I have to do it, it's always worked out for the best. And there's always the judgment side. And at the end of the day, if one's got good intentions, you can't control how other people are going to perceive it. But more people than not are going to see like this person, like even if it's a bad joke, for example, that you upload or people don't find it funny, there'll be more people that find it funny, but your intentions were pure and most people pick up on that. Yes, there's the internet, for example, and people are going to be themselves. But through my
Yeah.
experience, you're never going to please all people, which is a journey in itself, especially for me. But just, oh, okay, you've given me a look to
Oh, totally.
what sprung to mind.
But yeah, I mean, this is the thing. You're never going to please everybody. And like, why would you want to? You know what I mean? Like, there's some people who I'm like, I don't want you to like my comedy. I'm sorry, but I don't. If you like, I just don't. Like, you're not my audience. And like, and that's totally okay. Like, I mean, we always say like, you're the only person who can be you, and not everyone's going to like it. And it's okay to have people, and it hurts. It hurts your feelings. It's tough. Of course, we want to be liked and have everything be positive. But like, I often see people post things where I'm like, I don't think that's funny, but I respect them for consistently putting things out. Like
Yes.
I'm like, that's where I'm like, oh yes, I want more of that in my life, even though I don't want to put out what they're putting out or I don't like it. Like it's just like, I see the art, I see them shining, and that's brilliant.
Within that as well, there, like I'm a pretty easy audience. I find most things funny. But when I see someone that have put something else, this actually, it can just be in general. Someone starting a business, which I might think is a stupid idea also, there's so many stupid ideas that have become big, like who am I to judge? But when I see things like, oh, that's stupid, my first point is, although I might have that judgment for like half a second, I'm like, that's really cool. Just putting yourself out there is so hard for a lot of people. I know that you've done
Yeah.
podcasts as well. Doing a podcast and expressing yourself, doing stand-up, doing writing, doing all the other jobs, it's very hard. A lot of the times, there's different stages, just putting yourself out there is like the hardest. Once you've done that, look, it doesn't mean everything's going to be the success that you might have in your mind, but you're on the forward momentum to achieving that. And also within that, I hate it when people post stuff when it's just so inauthentic. You can sense,
Yeah.
and that drives me nuts. I'd rather someone post something which is cringeworthy and terrible, not funny, whatever it is, but that person's doing their best. You like appreciate it. Like I've spoken about this a fair bit on the podcast, improv. When I did improv, some people get up there and say the worst stuff, but you don't actually judge it in the moment. Like, wow, they got up and they spoke their mind, and that was awesome. They meant no harm. That's so much better than if someone comes out while they're doing improv and pull out a piece of paper and try to recite a few lines.
Right. Yeah.
I'm all for authenticity. I know we spoke about this at the start, but I think that's what leads to long-term success is ultimately being you, because that's how you're going to succeed. You can emulate other people, but if you're being true to yourself, then you're going to succeed.
Yeah. And I think that this definitely touches back full circle on what we were talking about before, that if someone wants to hire you for a job, they don't want me. But if they want me and I'm like, oh, well, I really want to be like Michael. So I got to try and I'm going to have an Australian accent, or I'm going to like, whatever it is, I'm going to try and be like you and less like me. Then they're never going to find me. Right? If they wanted me, they're going to come and find me. But if I'm not being my authentic self, they walk right past me because they're like, oh God, like we want that, the bubbly with the mixed girl. And I wish she could be like, an immigrant maybe, or maybe maybe she's a mom, and it's like, I'm over here pretending to be something I'm not, and they miss me. And it's like, it's just doing yourself a disservice. Like what's for you will find you if you're being you. I think is the caveat to that saying.
Actually, going back also full circle about that manager that talked about dimming your light. I think that's so important. That's like an angel. That is someone like pushing in the right path. I had a manager, not quite like that. He's pretty much, why the fuck do you want to do this job, mate? Just don't do it. I took it the same way, and ultimately it pushed me in this direction. But I'm very grateful for that. Sometimes people tap you on the shoulder and just asking you a question in a sense. I know it wasn't quite a question, like, are you sure you want to do this? Because you know what? I didn't need to just think that way. And so who knows what would have happened, but do you feel like that manager like helped you like change your way of thinking or put you on a different path?
I think he just, he helped me not stray from the path. I knew at that time I didn't want to be doing that kind of job. And then I was kind of, you get tempted by shiny things where it's like, but it's secure and it's money and it's this. And so I was on this path, and then I was kind of like, well, maybe I could. And he just sort of bumpered me back onto here. And I was like, oh yeah, no, you're right. I'm where I'm supposed to be going in this way. Yeah, like if I had taken the job, I think it would have been fun for a while. And then it just would have taken me longer to get to where I am or where I got to with his help.
Yeah. I had another manager who I first met him. So that was through an internship. And then, I got my graduate job as an accountant. And he's like, I didn't want to tell anyone that I was doing stand-up comedy or trying to do stand-up comedy because I didn't know what the vibe would be like. And he's like, so what do you do for fun? And I just said all the basic stuff. He goes, no, mate, you must do something else. I'm like, oh, I've been like preparing like stand-up sets. And he kind of like pulls me over to the side and looks me right in the eye and goes, you won't be doing that here. I was like, holy shit, this is not the right place for me. But I couldn't even do it outside of work. And he was a terrible boss. And look, he would like put me down and do all of these different things, which was extremely stressful in the moment. And I was always like, why me? What's the universe doing? This guy's such a jerk. But I look back at it like 5 years later, I'm like, what a gift. And I'm not saying people need to accept abuse. You don't need managers like that. But to me, that was also course correction. Because if I didn't have someone like him, I would have been doing accounting for way too long. And maybe I wouldn't have had the courage later on. I'm not saying it's the same with you, But that was just such an important moment for me because I left when I needed. I probably stayed even too long, but that experience allowed me to do what I'm doing now, and I never look back.
Absolutely. It helps you never look back because you're like, oh, I can't believe I stayed that long. But even another thing too is like now you have this like golden nugget of like a jerk manager to pull from for your writing,
Yeah,
right? Like I'm sure
I
there
have
are
used that.
literal lines that you can pull that he said that can go into something that are hilarious or like deeply cutting or whatever. Like, you know, the show based on a true story that I was just on, it's wild, right? Like it is a crazy cuckoo banana story that people are like, what is that? Like, is what? This is like, how can this be happening? It's like a roller coaster ride. Craig Rosenberg, who wrote it and show directed and whom I love, so much of that show is pulled, literally pulled from his life.
Oh, cool.
Like that's why it's called based on a true story, because so much of it is they are experiences he actually had. And people might watch it and go, well, they can't mean this. And I'm like, no, that thing, that crazy thing, that actually happened. Like there's the more we learned about where he got the inspiration for things, and so much of it was just from his real life, the more we were like, wow, like this is the kind of thing that we're talking about where like nobody else could have written this script. If anyone questions him about anybody, he can go, but that's actually the thing that happened. Like this is pulled from my real life. And then you're like, wow, okay, well, let's get into it then. So it's kind of like, and not all of it's good, you know what I mean? Like a lot of it was like horrible things that happened,
Yeah.
but and it's a comedy. So there you go. Not that we need them. I agree with you. We don't need to be abused. We don't need to be these things, but we're going to encounter these kinds of people. We're going to encounter situations that are tragic or horrible or traumatic. And when we get to the other side of it, we can look back and pull from it and create something from it. So I
Great.
can't remember who said it now, but I really wish I knew who said it, but it was I want to say Sally Fields, but I don't think it was her. But take your broken heart and make art. Do you remember who said that?
No, but that is a great quote.
It's a very I'm hating that I can't remember who said it, but it was a very beautiful quote that I just remember hearing and being like, oh yes, because it sucks to have a broken heart, but there's just so much gold to be mined from all those experiences.
And especially of joy. I don't know where you stand on this. Like I've done this before heaps, but you know, coming from a broken heart, for example, we can experience a lot of negative emotions. But using those negative emotions for the good. I don't like the cliche, you know, like smoking and drinking and writing out sorry, I can only act if I'm in this place. I don't like that. But I interpret that quote, for example, or that way of being as, you know, stuff's gonna happen for you, or it's always for you, and you might be perceived as negative, but being able to transmute that into hopefully good experience or even to be able to laugh at, because if you can laugh at it, you've done the work, you're healing, you're in the process, and it's funny, and you can also educate people in a much better way, is always through comedy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you said it on purpose, but you said when things happen for you. And I'm like, yeah, when we think of like things happening for us, we think of like good things, something positive. We get a job, we get booked. But I took what you said to mean like when things happen, traditionally we might say to you, bad things, but it's like really they do happen for you. They do happen for you to grow from, or for you to redirect, or for you to move, or to appreciate whatever it is really for you in a sense in the long run. And you know, there's this toxic positivity of like, well, everything happens for a reason and blah blah blah. It's like not everything happens for a good reason that's productive. Nobody, lots of times you don't want to hear everything happens. Like your dad died. Oh, that happened for a reason. No, no, no. That's not what we're talking about here. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel depressed. You know what I mean? Like all of these things are normal conditions of being a human, and they're all okay. It's like, how do we dive into it and then come out on the other side? And I remember hearing from someone about being like Zen, this idea that if you were Zen, that you were always calm and you were always positive, and like that's a load of BS. You know, being Zen means having an appropriate reaction to what is happening in the moment, is how it was described to me in another way. And so if someone like is doing something that's harming you, it's okay to be angry about that. It's just not okay to hold on to it and then recreate the victimhood and then to go back and to be vengeful. What it means is like, it's okay to be angry in the moment, to stand up for yourself, and then to move on. And
Agree.
then that's where Zen is. Like, we are in this constant state of motion, and emotion that comes, we deal with it and we move past it, right? And that hopefully in the long term, when we are able to do that, we find more joy and we are able to be more present, because we are in this moment and then in this moment and then in this moment. So
I love that. And thank you for bringing up the toxic positivity as well, because I think I hope I don't lead people to that. It's so, as you said, I do it. Actually, I don't know if I do it, but it's all about like processing, knowing when to let go, victim mentality. And a lot of us, we can have experiences where we feel like a victim and we might feel like life's not working for us, and that's fine. But the crucial point that you said, it's about experiencing it, and then at the right time for oneself is to be able to let it go. That's so important. And I do believe that the life's working for us, even if we feel it might not be. But also back to like being yourself, and you said you're going to succeed as yourself. When I was first starting writing, I'd written a few TV shows, and someone was like, "So why would we get you as the writer?" I'm like, "What do you mean? I wrote this." And they're like, "Yeah, but why you?" And I struggled with that question for a while. And then I realized anyone can write like a stock standard script or be like a stock standard character. But what is it that you bring to the table that makes you have to be attached to this project? Like you've talked about acting. And it was very interesting. Like, let's just say I wrote a script about being a wedding planner. I have no experience as a wedding planner. Maybe I can put a bit of myself in it, but I'm not going to ultimately, that project might not be a huge success. But you've done it, and I'm not saying that you have to be a wedding planner to succeed as acting as a wedding planner, but you bring in yourself and there's something in it. And I found that very interesting, because now I don't do it all the time, bringing myself into the project instead of thinking what I think has to be done, if that makes sense. We think we have to be
yeah.
someone else. That's where I've kind of had my point of view. And although I might not have ticked off all of the success box at this stage, but I feel that leads to a much more fulfilled life, a better job in that creative project, because I'm bringing myself into it and not just doing what I think other people. So I'd imagine that comes into acting, writing, stand up. If you're not being authentic and you like trying to play someone else, doesn't mean you can't emulate someone else. You're not you wouldn't have been able to get to where you are today.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, in stand up especially, it's like you talk about the things you experience and and that could be where you're from, your background, your relationship. It could just be like your perspective on something. Like there's things talking about politics. Politics are not like, why would I talk about, well, I don't really talk about politics, but like, if I were a political comedian, like, why me? Am I a politician? No, but like, what's my specific perspective on this political thing that's happening, right? So, and that comes from whether you're an immigrant or you're a woman or a tall man or whatever it is, right? Like whatever those things that make you up, you bring that hardcore with your perspective. And when you're talking about like, writing things that are very specific to you, I think that's completely, everyone's like, why you for this project? And now a lot of pitches, you need to put like, why me in there.
Yeah.
And that made me think of like, what about the people who are just writing the real stock, like Hallmark movie? And then I was like, what is it like, what's their motivation? Are they just like popping out? But I was like, maybe they just understand like certain pockets of the public, and that's why they should be writing it, because they get like, they grew up in middle America or whatever it was, so they can put like, they really understand what those people want. So whatever it is, like when you break it down, like even the most like mundane thing can really be an authentic thing for somebody if it's in the right vein of how they're doing it, if that makes sense.
I agree. And the big one, finding your voice as a stand-up. And we gently talked about this. I think you're doing acting, and then pardon me, your acting teacher or coach said, "Why don't you give stand-up a go?" And then the rest is history. So can you tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that and the process of finding a voice? Because it sounds like, and you please correct me if you're wrong, obviously you change and match, but also I think you started at 30. It sounds like you were also pretty, and I've seen your stand-up, it's hilarious. Sounds like you actually had pretty good understanding of your voice coming through as well, given your life experience. And obviously you've mixed and matched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I came to the table when it came to stand up, and I did come to it later in life, but I came to the table being pretty clear about like who I was and what I wanted, I think. And also, I had done a lot of things where I was in front of audiences. So I did a lot of motivational speaking. I had hosted a bunch of like, events and galas and things like that. I was a wedding planner. So if people didn't show up for things, I stepped in. So it's like I liked being in front of crowds. I felt very comfortable. I was a professional soccer player, which might not seem like it at first, but you are performing, you are on stage in front of audience. So, um, I kind of hit the ground running in that sense where I was already very comfortable with a lot of those things. But it was very interesting. Like when I first started, you started with 5 minutes and I had a I liked my 5 minutes. Even still now when I look back, I'm like, that's a pretty good first 5 minutes for a comedian to start off with. It wasn't just a bunch of dick jokes. You know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, I have like a perspective here. But that quickly, I kind of was like, oh, what else do I want to talk about? I sort of talked about being a mixed race person, blah, blah, blah. So I had to then like really figure like, what do I want to talk about? What's my voice? Like, what do I want to say? Like, not just on stage, but like as a person. And I think there was a lot of work for me because I felt like the people who I saw succeeding and doing well in comedy in my, hometown, they were all kind of like cynical or angry or.
Agree.
And I was like, oh, maybe I have to express like things I don't like. But that's not really who I was or who I am. And sometimes I would try that and it wouldn't work. And then it would naturally go back into my like silly, me. And that would work much better. So it's been this process of like finding the voice and feeling very strong and comfortable in that. And then something in my life will change and shift. And I'm still doing this voice, but now I'm sort of over here. So then I have to realize, oh, okay, I'm talking about my ass a little bit here. So let's bring this back in and find my voice for where I'm at. And then that continually is this process. Like now, I did my first album and special, and it was about my life up until I became a mom, which was a very, I recorded that when my first kid was 3 months maybe old.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was very new. It was basically my whole album was up until having a kid. And then, now I'm like, I'm a totally different person. I can't do a lot of those jokes where I was talking about like being single and my sex life or whatever, because now I'm having sex with my husband. It's not these wild, crazy, whatever. It's like a whole new sex life. It's a whole new life of like the things that are funny to me are like some of the things my kids say or how I react, or I'm trying to be a gentle parent and I was never gentle parented. So like the struggle of that. So it's refinding my voice at all these different milestones, as a woman who's going through all of this stuff. So I think ideally we find our voice and then we refind our voice and then we continually refine our voice and come to peace with that new voice and speak it authentically.
I'm glad that you bring it up because a lot of the times in all areas of life, we think that once we've got success doing it this one way, it has to be that way. And
Yeah.
as you a big proponent of, life happens, we change, we evolve, a lot of things happen. And I think that's, the comedy masters, that's what they do. They recognize when things are changing and they're able to play with that and still be true to themselves and be authentic. I'm also wondering, and I know we could talk about this for ages, you probably had no expectations of stand up when you were told to do or recommended to do stand up. And now you've got, I think it's called All the Parts comedy album. We'll put in the episode
Yeah.
notes so people can check it out. You've had so much success as a performer and you've been doing this for quite a while now. Did you ever think that from that moment you would have this type of success? Like, was there any goal or expectation?
I think when I got into this, I was thinking about this the other day. I think when I got into acting and stand up, which was really the same time, what I really, really wanted was like to be the next Oprah.
Interesting. I can
I
see
mean, to
that.
this day, I would love to host a show. I think it's such a fun way to showcase so many parts of what I love to do. Like, I love the stand up aspect, I love the scripted aspect, I love working with people, I love, like, those journeys. Um, and I think that I was like, that would be great. That's what I want one day, is to be like a show host, and I have a talk show. And then as things went on, I was like, oh, actually, I think I want to be on a show. I want someone to hire me because they've seen my stand up. And then I was like, I think I actually want to write a show and be in that show and like executive produce that show. Like, I think that the more I get into it, the more I'm like, oh, I want my voice to be heard. And I think that's like, there's a comeuppance right now of like a lot of women or people in the LGBTQIA community, or people who are mothers, or people who are like in their 40s, or like just these groups that have not been represented. Like, if you are sort of a cis white man, straight man who is in his 20s, there's a lot of stuff being written that's probably very similar to your perspective. There's been a lot of stuff written in that voice for a long time. So like, maybe there wasn't as much grinding for them to be like, oh, this is really not what I want to be saying. But I get, but as a woman who's like an immigrant and black and like not 25 and, all these different things, it's like a lot of the roles I've played have been like, it's fine. Or like, it's been a cool role, but it's not really saying anything about who I am. Whereas in stand-up, I literally get to say exactly who I am on stage. So this move to like, what do I actually want from my performance career, that's TV or film or whatever, it's really to have like, to put my stake in the ground and have my unique perspective be seen, and to have a comedy that's got drama and heart and development be seen as a woman that is like me. And I think that, playing Carolyn on the show that I just did was a very heightened and different version. It was the closest thing, I think, to me that I've played on film that wasn't me being me. So it was really fun. And I think part of that was because Craig Rosenberg, who wrote it, he was like, Aisha, I watched all of your stand-up. Like, I wanted you.
Yeah.
And it was the biggest compliment I've received, because I was like, wow, this part was written and he let me do so much improv and like play with it. But like, I got to say things that I actually felt and believed. And some of those lines got in the show, So it was cool. It was a really beautiful process and a beautiful thing. But I think in the end, I think I thought, oh yeah, I want that success, and there's this big dream and this big goal, and that has shifted and changed. And now I'm like, oh, I think part of the reason I wanted that was because that was the only way I thought at the time the real me and my perspective could be seen or heard in some way. And now I believe that there are many ways for that to happen. So
Okay, that's awesome. And I agree with you in terms of like the TV and film perspective, seeing a whole different range of people, whether it's beliefs or looks or whatever. It is actually such an important way to like show the world different and unique perspectives. So I think that's also really important. And in terms
yeah,
of that you've been able to find this role, I think that's so amazing, where you can bring elements to yourself and then being picked up for stand up. And I think that's also, we'll have to talk about this another time, but some people wait for the phone to ring, and as an actor that happens all the time, but you actually went out, you did something, and you were recognized for that thing that brought you into this other thing. And it shows that you might think, as an actor, a lot of actors have spoken about this, you might audition and you might think it doesn't go well. Then in a few years later, I remember you from that audition. So take this job. And it's a nice reminder to myself and hopefully the audience that just because you do the one thing, it doesn't mean it's like done and dusted. You can still reap positive rewards. Not that you should have the expectations, but just, you never know who's going to see it in a positive way. And
totally.
okay, I could speak to you for a gazillion hours. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to do a rapid fire segment. So the first thing that springs to mind, and we're going to tie up a few things as well. You're now on this show based on a true story. What was that moment like when you got that phone call and they said that you'd be part of the team?
Oh, it's so vivid for me because my youngest was very sick. And so she was cyclical vomiting, which means you're just vomiting over and over and over again. And so and at the time I was also breastfeeding. So I was like breastfeeding and topless and covered in vomit, and she was crying. It was a very horrible, horrible moment. It was like desperate and like, what are we going to do? And my phone kept ringing. And it's like, what are they calling me for? So I picked up, and then I got this beautiful news. And it was like, the most perfect juxtaposition of the two parts of my life, right? Like this whole, like barf covered topless mom who's tired and like feeling so stressed out, and then possibly the best news I could get in any moment of my career happening at the same time. And my celebration was like, thank you so much, like crying on the phone to my agents and manager, and then having to hang up the phone and just continue on with my beautiful, crazy, you know, difficult at that moment life, because that's what you do. So yeah, it was a really perfect, it couldn't have happened in a more perfect way.
I like that you're smiling. I'm not going to comment on them because I'm going to derail them and then we'll be here for another 200 hours. You mentioned that, oh yeah, one thing to type. You mentioned that you're in hospital because you're hustling so much. What was the lesson or takeaway from that experience?
Cool your jets, lady. Like, your health is the most important thing. And as they say, you know, you got to put your mask on in the airplane before you do anyone else's. And it's very cliche, but it's very true that you must take care of your body in order to be able to do anything else. So there's no sacrificing that. There's no sacrifice that's worth it when it comes to your health. That was my takeaway.
I know I said one in comment, but that's very cool. You mentioned you have heaps of stories as a wedding planner. Are there any that spring to mind, or any stories where you're like, this couple ain't gonna last, or anything where you're like, wow?
I mean, there were a few of those, but the funniest one to me was another guy who worked at the wedding planning business with me, who was just an absolute disaster. And I remember he was sort of, I came in and he was more senior than I was, and he used to meet with the couples, but he was very like kind of schlubby and nervous and always sweating. And I just remember at one of the meetings where I was training and like learning, and he sat there and he like picked this like zit on his head, and then it started bleeding, and he kept like picking it and looking at it. And then he at one point smelled it. It was like it was an absolute disaster. And I was like, what is happening right now? And I kind of took over the meeting because this couple who's like talking about what linens they want for their tablecloths is like, what is going on with this guy? And then shortly after that, our boss made me the face of all these meetings, and he was in the back, and I was the one taking all the meetings with the clients and the brides and the grooms. So, but it was just like that guy alone, there's so many stories where he was just an absolute disaster. I think he ended up like getting arrested. It was bad. But yeah, that for me, there was a lot, like, you know, there's bridezillas, there's groomzillas, there's the whole thing. But one day I'm right, he's going to be a major character in something I write, because he's absolutely unrealistic.
I'm a big proponent of never judging a book by its cover, but if someone's picking a zit on their head and they're bleeding and they're smelling it, maybe you can judge that person.
Oh yeah, and the cover really told you what was in that book with that guy.
Oh
like there
my
was
goodness. They, you know, could be very, as you know, very stressful, and they probably not even like listening to you or him speak. They're probably like, "What have we signed up for?" Thank you. Please put that. Make him like a coaching person in the coaching show that I've made.
Oh yeah, he would be. I mean, ironically, I would never take him on as a client when I was coaching, but yes, I would put him in.
You get the one call from jail, like, "Hey, I've been arrested. Can you help me?" I'm like, anyway. Okay. Got a few. Oh, you did a TED talk about failure. What made you want to do that, and how do you get involved?
All of my failures. I think that the truth was somebody asked me if I'd be interested, and I was like, what do I really want to talk about? And I had a lot of different ideas. And in the end, I came to this because I was like, you know, I am terrified as an artist, and that's like a beautiful place to be in. But it's like talking about like people who put things out there and we criticize it, but we're not doing, like, how much better it is to actually do the thing and fail a million times and to learn from that, because that's what actually gets you better, is the message I think I wanted to put out there as like, what do I really believe and what do I want to convince myself of? It was kind of a convincing me of it. And the funny thing was, I kept getting coached to slow down my speaking and to stop moving my arms as much. And I think in the end, my talk, when I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's not even me. You know what I mean? Because it just doesn't feel like I'm so animated and like, they're like, ah. They were like, Aisha, calm down. Like you can't talk like that on stage. And so I was very like, you know, there's something very important. And I'm like, oh God, like it just feels so cheesy to me to watch it, but the message I think is good. So,
okay. I saw it. I didn't notice any of that. It's a great message. And it's also funny that
you
you noticed, because I didn't notice it. but then it would also
Yeah, like I think of it as a failure almost, which is a beautiful irony that I think about how we should all fail. And I'm like, yeah, it's a failure right there. I did a bad job, but it's fine.
I will also put that in the episode notes so people can check that out. I'll ask the last two questions before we go. What's the next big dream or goal?
The next big dream or goal for me is to write something that gets my voice and my perspective out there. I would love, I'm in the process of writing things and pitching things, but I would love to write a TV comedy dramedy about someone, like about me, essentially, about the way I think about things. I have some different things that are about motherhood or about when you get pregnant and you lose roles and you get taken advantage of or dropped from things. So there's different like struggles that I've had that I want to write about and like put them out there and have it be comedic and also the like drama and like tragedy of it all. So I want to write something, make it, and be in it is the next big goal.
That sounds very cool. Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
Oh, so much. I mean, this is what I spent my whole coaching career working with people on. And I think that what I would like to say is that, and I've said this in another podcast recently, someone once told me, if you die and you go to fill in the blank with whatever your, heaven, afterlife, whatever is, what if you met the version of you that was never scared to try something? What would that feel like? And what would you regret? And I was like, oh, like it always almost brings me to tears to think about it because I'm like, oh my gosh, we're all going to die. What are we so scared about? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Maybe my advice to everybody is just like, nobody cares. Just do the thing. If it fails, no one's going to care in the long run. Like, unless you kill somebody, no one's like, just do it. Just try it because you will learn from it or you will find joy from it or you will find pain from it and it will just like help you decide on a new thing. But do not die being scared to try the thing.
I always say this when someone really inspires me on the podcast. I say, let's put in your TED Talk. But now with you, I can say, add it to the TED Talk because that is so inspiring. Actually, the last question before we go and I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with your show that's out. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Oof. I mean, you asked such good questions. Here's what I'll say. One of my favorite people we were roommates here when I first moved. He's one of my best friends in the world. He's so goofy and hilarious and wonderful. And he says, these are the three questions he asks everybody. And I think they are so brilliant. And they are, do you believe in ghosts? What was the first time you fell in love? And when was the last time you shit your pants? And I think it's such a well-rounded 3-question interview.
Oh, that is
right?
great. Would you like to answer them?
Okay, so I do believe in ghosts. The first time I fell in love was my first real boyfriend, David Barrett-Flat. We're friends to this day. And the last time I shit my pants, I think I was driving to when I was on the road doing college gigs, and like every exit that I was trying to get off on the highway was closed. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do here. And yeah, it was too late when I got to the McDonald's on the third exit. But you live and you learn, right? I should have stopped a lot earlier. But thank you, Rich Wilkinson. That's who gave me those questions. My good pal, Rich. Yeah.
Would have been funny if you're like 20 minutes ago. I'm glad that.
Yeah. During this interview. Yeah, I didn't want to leave. It was so enthralling, but I was very excited. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and check out your new show based on a true story?
Based on a True Story is on Peacock. So I know that is not available everywhere right now, but it's rolling out into different, outside of America centers as time goes on. So that will be coming out. Just, keep your eye out for it, based on a true story. If you are looking to follow me, I am on Instagram at Aisha Alfa and on Twitter at Aisha Alfa. And my website is aishaalfa.com. So if you type in my name, you're going to find me. And I post about my live shows. I have a live show here in Los Angeles called Toasted, which is a monthly show at the Hotel Cafe. I have a podcast called The Shoutout Show that people can listen to. And any shows I'm doing or, big developments, I post on my Instagram or on my website. So, and also I encourage people to reach out and message me if you've seen my work or whatever, because I think people reach out and then when I respond, they're often like, oh, I didn't think anyone was going to be on the end of this. And so it's a really wonderful connection. So feel free to reach out to me on any of those platforms because I do read them and message back.
Amazing. Those will all be in the episode notes so people can check it out. You are amazing. You are so empowering and super authentic. Thank you for doing this. It's really awesome.
Thank you for having me on. This was so fun. I really, it's like you never know what you're going to get when you sit down and talk with somebody. And I do have like anxiety when I'm one-on-one where I'm like, I hope that we get on. But
Really?
like this was such a joy. So thank you. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you.
I love how Aisha talks about individual success and team success and how regardless of the circumstances, you need to know when to step up. That is, knowing when to thrive individually or knowing when you need to push forward or take a back seat. It's all about being a team player and thinking about the people around you. Often in life, we think we need to go 110%, all guns blazing, but Aisha gently highlights how you can achieve success and happiness within a good team, whether professionally or personally. So as she says, the goal is always to work hard, work to improve and grow, but you have to be the best version of yourself regardless. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. Sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. Naeem Calloway. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.